Well, hello there, humans, bees, earthlings, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, and whoever you're lucky enough to be doing it too. I've been doing it exceptionally poorly. I just finished a stream with Snake Eyes where we lost or drew 8 in a row at Tier X, which was probably about time. We've been having some brilliant streams of late. We've usually had pretty good winning records and very, very good win rates in them. But like most things in this world, we expect that our best is the norm. That we can't possibly be as bad as everyone else, and it just goes to show that we're every bit as bad as you would think. Today I'm going to be having a run through with the T54 and the E5. And why have I chosen these particular tanks to have a chat about? Well, it's pretty cool actually. We sometimes forget just how far the game's come and exactly how much things have changed in the game, and how different tanks have got a lot out of the game as things have progressed and balance changes have come in, and how dynamic things how dynamic the nature of the movement of things is. And that's particularly true with this thing. This is the T54. Once upon a time when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, way back in 2015, this thing was the duck's guts. It was the undeniable Ayatollah of a rock and roller. It was ridiculously good. Still a good tank. In fact, it's a pretty well balanced tank now. But it's lost a lot of the joy. With patch 3.6, there was the lovely pronouncement that came out that the T54's turret armor was adjusted, and that the D54 gun would go from 330mm to 270mm of pen on its heat, and the D10T2S would also go from 330 to 270. And that was just the finishing touches on the balance of the T54. This was the most whinged about tank in the world. It really was. It was a tank that just drew massive amounts of angst and anger, because for such a long time, Russia was 100% the leader in the field of high explosive anti-tank shell technology. You could fire heat in this tank and it would go through anything. It would go through the sides of an E100, it would go through the sides of an IS-7, it would go through the sides of an IS-8. The penetration numbers didn't seem to matter. Now, you can see looking at an IS-7 just how difficult a proposition that is. It's a massive tomato to your 201mm of pen on the gun that I really used for a long time. And even though there is a clear and absolute sight-on shot here, if you're firing through the spaced armor, you just don't really have the pen to reliably get through it. Now, there are spots you can hit if you know what you're doing, and that's all that kind of thing, but I'm using this to illustrate just how strong the tank used to be. You would switch to heat, you would have 330mm of pen, it would ignore spaced armor, and it would go straight through, and that no longer happens. And that's a good thing. That's a really, really good thing. This was, without doubt, my mate Snake Eye's most favourite tank in the world. We would go driving in these things, and he would load up 34 rounds of heat and like 2 rounds of AP. I would load up mostly AP at about 5 to 8 rounds of heat. And the other thing was, matchmaking back in those days gave you a scope of 2 up, 2 down. So you would come across tier 7 tanks in this, which gave way to the hilariously overpowered, novelty-inducing Snake Eyes firing heat into T43s and the like, which was ridiculous, like 330mm of pen on the tank. And the tank had 129mm more pen on its heat rounds than it did on its AP rounds. And that heat went through everything anyway. It didn't seem to be affected by spaced armor. So it could quite conceivably, and before the turret, the 3.6 turret patch and everything like that, you could sit this thing in front of tier 10 heavies and TDs, and it could indeed perform a heavies role. And it could do it as a tier 9 medium. It was very mobile, and it's maintained that mobility. It was very, very low to the ground. It had very, very good camouflage. It also had the best coefficient for credit earnings at tier 9. It had a 100% credit coefficient for tier 9. The game's changed a lot. Heavies are really coming to the fore now. Like, heavies seemed very much to be, the IS-7 in particular seems to be the new chosen one. It was always strong, but with the new changes, it's really picked up. And I've found it to be incredibly powerful and incredibly bully boy. But the T54 has been left back in the dust. It's now solid, but not amazingly so. And with the changes to premium ammunition, even if the heat thing didn't exist, like if it had been able to just pen everything with heat still, that's not even an issue because there is so much less damage coming out of your premium ammo. Indeed, if you fire premium ammunition in the T54 now, you end up doing 260 damage as opposed to 310. And you only get 270mm of pen, and it doesn't go through all the spaced armor. And your turret isn't the godlike thing it used to be. So you can see the landscape really has changed, and we quite often forget that. We are so focused on the now and the here, and it's very easy to forget that this was a change that was screamed for. The world wanted this change so badly, and Wargaming have done it. They've reduced the T54 to about what is, in my opinion, a balanced tank. And that's the first tank I want to look at today. There's some other tanks around that are obvious winners. And the big winners class-wise for me are heavies. Like, heavies have become so much more efficient. There is such a limited value to firing, firing on a heavy now with your standard AP rounds, because the ones that really used to work the heavies over, like the mediums, that could have the armor profile to hit them and still pump out massive DPM, they just don't really have it anymore. You can see the 54 still gets bounces. If you know how to wiggle it and jiggle it and be a little bit naughty with it, you can still get bounces, but you don't have the ability to just go toe-to-toe with an IS-7 anymore, as you used to, and just fire heat rounds, which really was the original pay-to-win conspiracy theory. Everyone hated it. You would get really, really good players who knew what they were doing. They would fire heat rounds in T54s. They would just take the damage, they would take the penetration, and they would learn to live with it. And it was all good. And nowadays, you really have to watch the way you play and make sure that you're doing everything correctly and take your time. And it's not the mad vehicle of destruction and justice that it once was. I mean, you can see just how good the armor is now on a heavy tank. Even an IS-8, like, he's angled up on his pike nose. So if I go to heat, I can only do 260 damage to him, which I love. It rewards the basic stats of the tank, and it rewards the ability to aim and do damage. Now, you're going to get RNGesus smashing you and smacking you on the arse every once in a while, and that's all there is to it. That's just how it is. Some days are diamonds, some days are coal. I just had a day that was coal. Yesterday I had all diamonds. I won a whole lot of games, but that's how it goes. The big key for me is that there's been certain tanks that I think have really done well. Now, my good mate Slowzy pointed out to me that the E5 is actually now pretty good if you fully buff the thing. So I went and spent my hard-earned on the E5, and, well, it's not hard-earned on this account. I did actually spend 90,000 spare parts that I've been saving up on my Bushka account across a couple of tanks earlier, and I wish I could reset my spare parts. It would be awesome. Anyway, the E5. As much as the E5 was always considered a solid, good tank, the ones that everyone talks about at the moment as doing really, really well are tanks like the IS-7 or the Mouse. Tanks that have big, massive armor profiles. But jack-of-all-trade tanks like the E5 have actually really benefited from the equipment loadouts, the new equipment loadouts, because they were always pretty good at a bunch of stuff, and they had some things that held them back. Like the E5's got some gun depression, it's got a nice solid turret, but it has that weak point on top, the hatch. It's been fairly mobile, all those kind of things. Well, now, with the ability for equipment to actually spread across a broader spectrum of abilities, you can take a tank like the E5 and turn it into a tank that doesn't really have a lot of weaknesses. It is a really mobile heavy. It's got lovely pen on the gun. It's got really nice armor with the plus 5% because it works beautifully well. That 5% really helps you with that hatch, especially against guys that fire HE at your hatch. It helps with the overall rounded nature of your armor profile, which is a jack-of-all-trades armor profile. It's not set up so you can really side scrape hard and do all that kind of thing. And you can see here, its mobility when you buff the traverse numbers is really cool. Hey, like it's been a great beneficiary of of an overall holistic approach. You can get your traverse up to 33 degrees on this. And you're 5% to your armor. You can get gun handling, you can get your enhanced gun laying drive, and your vertical stabilizer, which means that you get a gun that will have a really lovely aim time. You can get that down to 3 seconds of aim time, which on the move on a tank like this is excellent. And it looks so hot and sexy. I mean, I really like the way this tank looks. There's another I7 who just happened to walk out in front of two 183s and really, I mean, hats off for timing. That is not what you want to be seeing. You can also rest assured, like the E5 has excellent penetration values. It's got a 120mm M58 gun. It's got two 71mm of pen if you run it with that calibrated shells, or you can just run it straight up with a gun rammer and have that extra 7% of rate of fire, which is bloody great, and you've got 258mm of pen. So your 258mm of pen on your tier 10 120mm gun and your 340mm of pen on your heat is hugely differentiated now against tanks like the T62A, which have 240mm of pen on their APCR shells and 290mm of pen on their heat shells. And you can see that was Wargaming's whole idea with the nerfs to mediums and the changes to the turrets. They wanted to turn mediums, into tanks that had to use their brains and get out in the flanks and do things, and not just tanks that could go hull down in the face of a tank like the E5 and consistently pen them without having to do a whole lot of aiming, thanks to really balked heat mechanics and the ability to bounce shots consistently. They've nerfed a whole lot of that stuff. And look, the changes at Tier 10 have been dramatic. And I think the changes at Tier 10 are more noticeable than the changes at other tiers. Because at other tiers, you still have tanks like the 54 Mod 1, the Type 59, the T54 Lightweight. These kind of tanks that can still, basically take a medium and play it as a heavy, or a light and play it as a heavy medium. At Tier 10, that doesn't exist. We don't have the light tanks, and the calibers on some of the shells are just bloody enormous, and they disregard whatever you're doing. And you can see I'm going to move out here and fire one in to that 183. You've got tanks like the 183. The 183s are like a curse upon the earth at the moment. They are bloody everywhere. And they are, admittedly though, your 183s are very interesting in that when they work amazingly well. And when RNG's not running your way and the shells just go everywhere, they're just an absolute train wreck. So I can see the swings and roundabouts there, the bang for your buck you get, the risk and reward of running a 183. But look how nice this tank is. And for a tank with a jack-of-all-trades armor profile, it's kind of the tank that I think is on the thin edge of the wedge. And by that I mean, you jack the armor up on this 5% all over, and it gets to be a really, really interesting proposition. It gets to be a tank that can do things and bounce shots you don't expect it to after playing it for a long time as an older school tank, and you end up with a tank that's a real traditional heavium. Like, it's got mobility, it's got pace, it's got this lovely armor profile, it's got a great gun. It's just a bit of a revelation. I really enjoyed it. I played a few games in it. They were all around 3,000 damage. The tank responds well. It bounces just enough. It's not going to bounce against TDs and things, but meh. Those days are gone for me. You don't really expect to do that all the time anyway. And because the gun's reliable and for a heavy anyway, and it's got good pen numbers for a heavy, and good pen numbers for anyone at Tier 10, you're able to use the tank without actually firing a lot of heat. And that means that you can do your full damage number, rather than having to run the tank as a balked heat machine, which will now give you a lot less damage per shot. You get 340, which coincidentally is the same as your heat rounds. You can see you just jerk a shot there out of that 183. So that's it, guys. I just want to have a bit of a generic talk, a bit of a chat about the way the game's changed and how a lot of tanks have changed with it. and how the numbers across the tiers have changed, and different tiers seem to have different big dogs and different levels of success and failure depending on the style of tank you want to drive. And it's very, very hard now to say that there is absolutes within the game. You can set up your tank with a degree of utility, and that can make the tank a whole lot of fun. Thank you everyone who has been sponsoring the channel. I really appreciate it. There's some big news coming out this month. It's a big month. I can't wait for it. There's lots and lots of stuff going on. There's lots of stuff I'm going to be involved in, and lots of things that hopefully I can help you guys out with. I'm really looking forward to it. It's been a wild kind of year, and I've enjoyed it, but man, I'll be happy to finally put spare parts behind us and get some goodwill back from the community, because it's been very, very tough for me the past few months. Until next time, look after yourselves and stay safe on the battlefield.